Hey, I'm back. This is Chandler for Melda Production, and today I'm going to be going over a breakdown of this song called Sewazuki. I released this, I believe, last week. Look on my channel to find it if you're wondering what I'm talking about. And I want to go over the different instruments and some of the sound design and mixing I did for this. I used pretty much all Melda plugins for this, so I'm going to show you how I used them and where. This might get a little bit long, so look at the bottom. I believe I hopefully separated everything into chapters so you can find the drum sections, guitar sections, synth sections, etc. Okay, so let's start off here with drums. I'll play this a little bit just so you can hear what's happening. So as you heard there, it starts off with just a shaker and some snaps. I did something maybe slightly interesting that you maybe didn't know with this. So you hear those snaps. I have it set at effect 1. I had to set that up myself. Here, so when I click it sounds like this. Now when you do this, you'll be like, hey, mine doesn't sound like that, mine's in mono. And the reason is I used different layers here. So you see here under velocity layers, you can actually layer multiple samples together. Here I did 2, and I have it to all. That way it's not triggered by velocity actually, just every single time you hit this effect 1, it's going to play both samples. So I set one to 50% left, the other to 50% right, but normally you do that, you're like, okay, it still doesn't sound stereo. And the reason is you need a delay. So this first one, if you look here at the layer source, I have multi-sample delay 0 milliseconds. The other one, 14 milliseconds. If I put this down to 0 and then play it, sounds mono. But when I move this delay, so you're getting a slight delay there, in that case 14 milliseconds, now listen to it. You can hear it sounds like 2 different snaps, and they're on the left and right. Now, of course, you can move this up even more, like this. Probably too much. I recommend between like maybe 12 milliseconds and 35 milliseconds usually sounds good. So if you make it longer, it's going to sound looser. Move it down, it's going to sound tighter. So just find out whatever's good for you. I think I had it on 14, but I'll leave it at 15. So that's all I did for that. As it gets into the next section, maybe I missed it. Go back. So this is the next section. This is basically the same thing. I think I did the same trick with the hand claps. I'm still using the shakers, and then as I move forward, so I did that kind of like rolling hi-hats here. I wrote these in myself. You might be wondering, like, okay, how do you do that and get these off the beat? So this grid down here determines the grid spacing. So now it's on 16th notes here, but you can actually change this to 32nd note triplets or even 64th note triplet or 32nd note triplets, etc. And so that's how I put some of those on there. So by switching back and forth between these, you can get some of those triplets in there. And I think that really adds some kind of interest to this. If you really want to know more about that, I can explain more about my theory behind it, why and how I do that. But for now, just know that I did it. That's what's happening here. I just have a hi-hat sound. I should also show you which one I'm doing. So I got this, I forgot, maybe it's paid for or maybe it's a free one they're giving away. So this one for Future Bass Starter Kit. So that's all I did there. I have the bass drum in here. I think for the most part it sounds good. I didn't have to do too much mixing. I got in here and I did some little things at the B section or the chorus section, I should say. So that's basically all I'm doing. I have the snare drum playing fairly loudly. The second snare drum is kind of like a, I don't know, more like a clicky or I don't know, a fatter snare drum. So I just put that in there just for some variation. Here, if you notice, I'm on this key, but you notice there's 3 different patterns. And I'm switching between these. So pattern 1 sounds like this. So it has that snare 2 playing. Pattern 2 here basically doesn't, it has just a gap. And then 3 doesn't have the gap, and it plays a snare and the hi-hats all the way through. So by using these slots over here, you can create variations fairly easily, and all you have to do is just adjust the velocity when you're putting that down in your MIDI. And that way you can get some kind of variations on things without doing too much. It's fairly easy, especially if you do this just as one section, like, oh, I just put one there at first, and I'm like, this is a little bit boring. You can add these other ones here just by clicking this plus sign here, like this, boom, I add another one. You can just copy and paste it in here and add some variation, and then adjust it afterwards, even after you've written the song, just so you can get some more variations in there. I think that's really easy and convenient. So there you go. That's how I did the drums. Only other thing I should go over is a little bit about the mixing. I didn't do too much on these. Like I said, these are kind of pre-mixed drums. I did some equalization on some of the tom drums that I thought, oh, I kind of need this or don't need this. I put a limiter on that snap effect just because I found it was getting too loud at points. I put a little bit of reverb on here. So this M turbo reverb here. It's just a small space, a percussive space here. It's used as a send inside M Drummer. I sent a few things there. For the bass drum, basically all I did was this, cut off extreme low end, emphasize this above 100 just to kind of make it stick out a little bit if you don't have large speakers that can reproduce that low bass. And I cut out some of the mids because I found that was interfering with some of the other sounds. But basically that was good as it was. For the snare, I used the, this plugin here. It's really good. I did a video about it before. Let me see if I can find where it starts so you can hear what it sounds before and afterwards. Basically, this just makes it sound fatter. So you can hear this really gives it a lot of body by using this EQ here and some of the dynamics and probably a little bit of the reverb too and saturation. But at first it had more of a, you can hear those like snares, that white noise at the top. I got rid of some of that and I added in a lot of body in there, which is what I wanted for this. Maybe more hard hitting, I think. So that's what I did for that one. The toms, this is just kind of like a bus, put a gate on there, add some, dynamics there, a little bit of saturation. I guess the dynamics is compressor, I should say. A little bit with just the hi-hat, cutting off some of the low end. Nothing too much there. Ooh, closed everything. I didn't mean to do that. And then on the master, I just add a little bit of compression, not too much, and kind of doing a little bit of smiley face EQ here. I'll let you hear before and afterwards. I'll do here. So hopefully you can hear it just sounds a little bit more in your face, but you see I'm not really doing too much volume differences in here. It's just kind of pushing it forward, which is what I wanted. And then afterwards I have just another compressor here. This also brings it forward and just makes it a little bit more punchy. Okay, This one I just mix in the wet dry, so this isn't 100% wet. I try to get something really squashed, and then I brought up the wet signal to about, was it 42%? That's what sounded good to me, and that gave me the punch that I wanted out of this. So there we go. Hopefully that answered everything about your drums and everything. I also have these kind of ducking some other instruments, and they're going into some reverbs, like this short reverb, but I'll show that afterwards. So we're done with that. Let's go into, I guess, the next most important part. Let's go into the guitars. So we have this intro guitar. This is just clean guitar that has a phaser on it. So this is very basic. I have this gate on everything. I have the comp here, but comp actually isn't doing anything. I think this is because I used a preset to start this. I'm using this Minneapolis here. I didn't even change much here. I just turned the middle down and the volume down. I think at the middle section here, like 5.5, it distorts a little bit. I didn't want that, so I just turned that down. And then the cabinet, I use this nitrogen. I think this is a great sounding, nice clean cabinet. And then I use the phaser here. Just want something nice, slow. Kind of reminds me of old Isley Brothers or something. After that, I went in here, and the reason I did this is because sometimes that phaser can make things just sound, or actually the dynamics get too high. So I just want to stop that. So I have a really fast attack here, and it just kind of brings things down. Also, because it's stereo, it can make one side almost clip while the other one's good. So I unlinked the channels, so that way it's like having two compressors, one on the right side and one on the left side. So they're not compressing the same thing in the same way. That's just to keep it under control, basically. And then finally, I have this, just cutting off the low end. Fairly basic. Let's go to the next part, probably the big one, lead guitar here. Should start around here. For this one, I probably should have taken out some of those squeaks, but I was lazy in my editing a bit. Hopefully it's not too noticeable. One thing I'll talk about here, which I think is really good that people don't talk about this, is in Notepad. You might be wondering, like, what is this? This is basically just lets you write things. But the reason I think this is so good is because here I can write down settings and leave them for myself in case I forget. So this one says guitar on the center, probably should be in on the center, probably center position, next split position, with the coil split switch on. That way, if I have to come back and do something, I'm not like, what was this setting on my guitar? How do I reproduce this? I can just leave that in there for myself. And now you can actually do it in Guitar Architect. I think it was kind of broken before, but now you can just go in here and you see Notepad, boom, write something down in here. So that way you can remember what guitar settings you use, or if you're using multiple guitars, which guitar did you actually use for this, and you don't forget. Anyways, inside Guitar Architect, we have this. I have the gate on as always. I have a compressor doing quite a bit. I have the amp here. I'm using a KC Special, one of my favorite amps. Turn the bass down, mids up, treble up, etc. Turn the gain down. I don't want any distortion there. And I have the cabinet. I'm using the same nitrogen. I think this was actually the exact same settings. The other thing I'll talk about here is the ERs. This one is really different. Here, this just makes things stereo. I'll go in here and solo it just so you can hear it a little bit more clearly. So here, is it on? You hear when it's off, it just kind of shrinks to the center. If you want that, I mean, just don't use it. But if you want something a little bit more wide and, to me, a little bit more fat, you can use this ER module to just kind of get that. I use the studio setting here. There's different modes, but I thought studio sounded the best here. So that's what I used. I didn't bring it up, well, not too high, like 40% here, just so you can hear it, but it's not, so obvious. So those are my settings for the lead. I also have here two background instruments on the left and right. So these are just double tracks. So I'm just using these to emphasize some chords or notes, etc. I have compressor on here, obviously the gate, and then I'm using the Junko amp. Basically, I set this with the bass down, low mids down, treble up, and I'm using this bright. So for this, I don't use a cabinet. This is kind of like your cabinet in itself. It's really crude, like EQ, but it sounds really good here. I wanted this to sound almost like playing directly into a console, and as opposed to an amp, and give it that type of sound. And I think it did. It sounds really thin, but that works well with the other guitars, or the other lead guitar, at least in my opinion. Here, I use the same thing for both guitars, one going right, one going left. It's the exact same thing. I just change this here, so I'm using different settings on my guitar. I cut off the low end and the high end and something in the middle that just didn't sound good. That's because I don't want it to interfere with the lead guitar. I just want it to kind of be there in the background. And I'm using the same dynamics trick with link channels, turning that all the way down because I don't want the right side or the left side to be louder than the other one. I want them to be basically balanced. So it's probably impossible to play the exact same dynamics with the exact same parts. So this just kind of evens it out so it doesn't sound like, you know, everything's leaning to the right or left, or even worse, leaning to the left for 1 second, then leaning to the right for another second. So that's what I did with this. You can change this by using the link channels, 100%. I put it 0%, but if you think like, you know, it's a little bit too much, you can put it at 50 or whatever you want. That's what I did with the guitars. I think, are there any other parts here? There's one other. This the build-up part here? Yeah, I think this is down here. So this one's just an arpeggiated guitar part. I think I used the exact same settings that I did with maybe the lead. I just put this M Turbo comp on there. So I thought it sounded good, and I have a fairly long delay on this. So there we go. That should be all the guitars. Let's move on to the synths. I have, sorry, all the synths going into a bus here. Actually, let's start with this beginning. This is really easy. All I used is this pluck maker. I actually made this device myself. Is it a preset? Yeah, wooden hammer. I probably did some small tweaks to it. And oftentimes I like to turn all of the effects off because I do the effects myself. But yes, just that wooden hammer preset. There we go. So that's the beginning synth. We get in here, we have more synths. So these are all being ducked because I have M dynamics. Lots of these, like the super saw bass, twinkle synth, etc., are all going into here. They're all being ducked by the kick drum. Now you might be wondering, like, how are you ducking it just by the kick drum? You have like this drum track, but you don't have single tracks. So if you're like me and you don't split all your tracks out, a way you can do this is by going to the sidechain input here and moving down the max frequency here of the sidechain until you can just hear the bass drum. So if I listen to it here, hopefully you'll just be able to hear that. So that's a way you can do that and duck it with the kick drum. So I wanted that just to give more impact to what I was doing. The second one, I'm doing almost the exact same thing. This one, you're probably like, oh, what is this? In Spectral Dynamics. This one, I'm doing the exact same thing, ducking it, but this time I'm ducking it with my lead guitar. And the reason is I just want everything to get out of the way when my lead is playing. So here you'll be able to see what the lead is playing. So it's not much, but hopefully you can hear it sounds almost like some dust or dirt has been like lifted off the lead guitar when I put that in here. So that just stops some of those frequency clashes. I don't want to do this too much with every instrument, but I think especially with the lead and all these things in the background, it's good. So that's what I did there. For the bass, I made this one myself. There's no device for this. I just had to make this from scratch. I used saw wave here, an octave down, saw wave normally. These are both like super saws, so you can see got the unison voices. And then finally, I just have a sine wave, and this is an octave down. You might be wondering, like, why do you do that? And that's because I'm going to cut off the fundamental frequency here, or fundamental tone, I guess, here, and then replace it with this sine wave here. So I do that there. So I have it set at 0.5, and I have a high pass filter to get rid of some of that bass, and then I bring it back with that sine wave. Mix them together there, and then I use ambassador here. So I have it soloed. I'll let you hear it. It sounds like this. So you hear that ambassador just makes it a little bit more distorted and easier to hear in the low end. After that, I went into this M Dynamics MB. So I have different settings for each of these and different amounts of compression for all of them. And this really changes the sound. I'll let you hear before and after. So it just gets rid of some of that nasalness and focuses more on the low mids and the lows, I guess. So there's that. I also have just this, and what I'm doing here is you see, like, oh, why are these strange colors? And that's because I have this in MS mode or mid-side mode here. Normally by default I believe it's in left and right, but I switch it to mid-side, and now some of these, like number 5, you're like, what is this high pass filter? Isn't that killing everything? And it's like, okay, I'm just cutting off the sides. So this way I'm not getting stereo signals down below about 150 hertz. So that's all I'm doing. So that's that. Hopefully that answers all the questions about the saw bass I made. Let's go here to this. This is the super saw. I basically did the same thing almost. So down an octave, another one down an octave, both super saws, as you can see here. This first one, just a little bit of detuning, not too wide, 8 voices. This one, 12 voices, a lot of detuning, a lot of widening here. And then I have another super saw. This is an octave up with even more detuning. I'm using the ratio to kind of blend them together to find out, okay, how much of each one there. And then they go into a mixer, and then M Dynamics MB. So play it, sounds like this. So I'm just using this M Dynamics MB, the multi-band compressor, to just kind of tame some of those highs so it's not so prominent. So that's all I did there. Another one, M Rhythmizer. This one is the big one. So I used the multi-band version. You might be like, why did you do that? The reason is I don't want the whole signal to be, stuttered and everything, if that's that's the proper term. So here you see from 20 hertz all the way to 2000 hertz, nothing is happening anywhere in here. Everything's just blank. It's playing it. But above 2000 hertz, here is where I have the rhythm starting. So at the beginning of this section, nothing happens. But then towards the middle, I turn it on and you hear like a transgate like this. So I did this just to add a little bit of movement. These chords repeat over and over again. So I thought, you know what, let's mix it up a bit. So that's why I put that on there. Next one, I have this in auto dynamic EQ. I'm just cutting some things, low pass, high pass filters. Some things in the mid range didn't sound so good, so I removed those too. Just some sound sculpting, I should say. I have this twinkle synth that starts playing, I think maybe someplace around here. So this is just the chipper device in M Sound Factory. It sounds like an old synthesizer, maybe from like a video game a long time ago. This one, Thick Square Pluck. I believe this was just in here, probably one of the presets I made years ago. So I just used that, and then because this is lo-fi, it sometimes creates lots of low end that doesn't sound good. All that stuff, just cut it out. You don't need it. It doesn't add anything good to your sound, so just removed it completely. I think that's all the synth stuff, maybe. I should probably have a riser here. Yeah. So this is the noise riser maker. I believe it's maybe starting from here. So I'm doing a similar thing here. This time I'm increasing this depth. So it starts out with just a normal white noise riser, and then it goes into kind of like a rhythmic thing. So this was just a preset, and then I just added some automation to the depth. That's all that is. That should be all the synth stuff there. Only other things are, let's see, oh, piano. That's actually fairly easy. Sounds like this. So I used M Turbo Comp to just kind of lighten that transient. I don't want that like strong transient poking out, so I just used this MPI 2500. Hopefully hear what that does. And oh, not that, wrong one. Here, and I cut off some of the low end. I boost some of the low mids. I want it to be kind of bassier. And here you're probably wondering, like, whoa, you cut a lot of that out. But as I said before, this one is just the mids. I'm leaving the sides as they are. I switch this to mid-side mode. If you haven't checked that out, definitely check that out. This one allows you to adjust things in lots of different ways. So I switched it from the default left-right to mid-side mode. Once it's switched like that, just go into any node, right-click it, and then here it's on default mid and side, but you can just switch it to just removing the mids or just removing the sides. Really useful feature that maybe some people overlooked. So here I'm just removing the side or the mid channel from these mids. That's getting confusing. So at around 1000 hertz, I'm removing this on just the middle channel. I'll let you hear it. I do this to get out of the way of the guitars and also just add some meat. This section doesn't have any kind of like bass and really doesn't have much percussion either, so I really need that in my opinion. So I added more bass down here. Okay, not too much. I have some AA chants going on here, in here. These just me just chanting myself. I have some compressors on there, nothing really interesting. 1176. I have this in unison on here. These are just double tracking. I have all of these. I have 3 different takes of me doing that, going into a vocal mix, and then I put the in unison on everything. So it goes from 3 voices to 6 voices. I have this comp on here, so MA2A. After that, I have M Auto Dynamic EQ. What I wanted to do with this was I just had to mess around with this a lot, take out some of the bass, boost some of the upper mids, etc. This was kind of annoying to mix because with everything else going, I needed it to stick out of the mix, but I didn't want it to overpower the guitars or anything else. So it's kind of hard to find the proper place for it, but hopefully you can hear it in the song. Maybe I did a good job. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. But that's how I mix those. You can see that I used quite a bit there. I think I went over all the instruments, maybe. Oh, I didn't go over the lead distorted guitar here before I forget about that. So here it sounds like this. So for this one, I have a gate, as always. I have this OD Super Overdrive MD1. Easy. I didn't really do anything to it. I just put it on there. It sounded good. Here I use this Venus amp, one of my favorite amps for leads. Have the gain turned up just a bit, but I have it on the pink setting instead of the red setting. So that's a little bit more of a subtle overdrive, I guess. Bass up, mids up, treble down, presence, same place, etc. This cabinet, I'm using this lead cabinet. This is one I made, so maybe I'll see if I can get this added to other Melda stuff in the future. I don't know. And ER, same as what I showed you before. So that's what's going on there. And then I'm going into a bunch of reverb, but I'll show you that afterwards. I have these other ones here. These are kind of like the background guitars. I think it's the exact same thing, yeah. So I did the exact same thing. I just don't have any ERs for these. I have one panned left and one panned right. These sound a bit different, and that's because here what I did is I cut off lots of the highs and some of the lows and got rid of some of the mid-range I didn't like. I really don't want these to be in the way of the lead distorted guitar, so I just put these subtly in the background, maybe a bit too subtly now that I think about it. I'm using some dynamics here, and this is the same thing as I showed before. I turn the channel link or link channels to 0 because I just want to balance these and make sure the left and right are completely balanced. Oh, I didn't even go over the lead guitar here. I have a little bit of compression here for the lead. That's just to suppress a little bit of that initial pick attack. And then in here, I change things up because I don't want a lots of low end here, but also I just want this to stick out above all the synths and everything else. So all those other places where you saw me carving the holes with the EQ, this is where I want to put this in that hole. So here, it just sounds like it kind of takes the blanket off. To me, it sounds like, this is a little bit too harsh, but I think in the mix, it kind of works. So sometimes you have to do things that by themselves may not sound so good, but in the mix, it's all right. Last thing I'll go over is just here, the short reverb bus. So I had a lot of things going in here. This one, intro guitar, my pluck synth. So lots of things are going to the short reverb bus. It sounds like this. Okay, well, maybe you can barely hear that. I'll try to turn that up in post. But I just used this sunrise chamber. It's not too long. Yeah, just 750 milliseconds. I have it 100% wet because this is a send. That's all I'm doing there. It's nothing too crazy. I think it just sounds good. Just put a little bit of reverb on things. Nothing too extreme, but a little bit just to give it some space. Next, I have this long reverb here. I think this is mostly for the piano. So this is really just to kind of give it that ethereal element. So I have this on the piano. I also have it on that Twinkle synth too. This one I use the Dirty Hall, and I'm actually using some modulation here. And I think the modulation gives it kind of that ethereal effect. I also turned down or turned up the high pass filter here, so you're not getting much bass out of this. I don't want this rumbling everywhere, so I cut that off. Let's see, there's a delay bus here. I think I have for my guitars. So here I just use M delay MB, and let's see here. I have 562 milliseconds there and 23 milliseconds here. This is probably a bit strange. So this is almost like an Allen Holdsworth type thing with a multi-delay. So I have one short delay here at 23 milliseconds, and then I have it offset 14 milliseconds to the right. So it's just kind of like two delays, one going left, one going the right, and the one on the left is 23 milliseconds. The one on the right is 37 milliseconds. So there you go. And the same thing is happening here. I have a longer one, 516, but on the left it's subtracted by 8 milliseconds, so it's a little bit less there. And this is just to give it stereo, but also give it a nice delay sound. I find oftentimes these short delays here with the stereo offsets can really give you some extra width. So that's what I did for that. And it's going into M Dynamics. All this is doing, I believe, is just a side chain, and it's ducking it. So it's just doing some kind of ducking with a lead. Nothing too crazy there. This is also going into this lead reverb bus, which sounds like this. So this is the Randy Hall. This one also has quite a bit of modulation and everything in it. This one sounds really nice to me, but this one I use the dynamics, and I'm using some ducking on this too. So if you see it here, so this reverb is being ducked. So if you didn't know, M Turbo Reverb actually has that capability, so you can do it. So that's what I did with that one. And then finally, I have this lead bus, which is not doing too much, but I'll let you hear what it's doing. So for this, I just have my lead sounds going into here. I'm cutting off the lows and the highs fairly severely and cutting out some of the mids that I don't like. I'm compressing it a lot. Use that M stressor, turn the saturation up, really squashing it, and then going into this double tracker. So the point of that is just to kind of give more width to the sound and, I don't know, focus those mids more in my leads. I believe I actually did it to the clean lead too here. Let me see. Yeah, so that was just to give it more mids and a more wide and fat sound. So that's what I did with the buses, and then I combined everything. It went in here to M Turbo Comp like this. So I just use the MSL bus comp. I'm just kind of tickling that gain reduction. So I'm doing like maybe 1-2 decibels of gain reduction. I turned the saturation off because I didn't really think the saturation added too much for this, so I just turned it down. And I'm using fairly subtle settings, at least in my opinion here. I used to use the master bus SSL like, and I adjusted the threshold, I believe, until it was just doing a little bit. I think it makes it sound better. I think it just pushes it forward, so to me that sounded better. After that, I don't think I actually used M Auto Dynamic EQ for anything, or did I? Oh, I cut off a little bit at the end. I don't know why this was peaking going high, so that's all I did there. And I also use this to kind of compare the spectrums between different things. I think I had M Compare before this at one point, so I could compare, different songs that I was listening to this to try to just balance everything out. Sometimes after you listen to something for too long, I find my ears start adjusting to it. I'm like, yeah, this sounds good. And then as soon as I put on something else, I'm like, oh, geez, that was terrible. What happened to my mids? Or, oh, my basses are way too loud. Or, oh, this is too trebly. There's no bass. So I find using M Compare is really useful to just give yourself some perspective so you're not going too far one direction or another. I find if I just use my own ears without any kind of reference, I will go off the deep end and I'll completely ruin my mix. So I use that, and I use this graphs here just so I can see like, okay, like something's wrong, but where is the problem? Like, oh, okay, maybe it's too many low mids or too many treble frequencies, etc. So that's what I did. So thank you for sticking with me. I know this was long, but hopefully that answered all your questions. I think I went through everything. This song, basically, I wanted to try using lots and lots of tracks. Before, I was perhaps more conservative when it came to using tracks. And I was like, you know what? I want to try going all out, using lots of tracks, doubling things, using more synthesizers than I probably need, splitting things up, etc. And maybe not 100% happy, but I was happy to try it, and I had lots of fun using all these different things in here and trying to make a really large sounding production. I'll probably do something, I don't know, maybe similar again. I had fun doing this, so maybe I'll do something like this again with lots of stuff. But if you like this, give me a thumbs up. If you have any other questions that I didn't answer, please leave those down below and I'll try to get to them. Also, be sure to check out all the other plugins at meldaproduction.com. Till next time, see you.